Hey, everybody, it's Eddie from Tokyo. This is your cryptocurrency update from Japan. I feel great. I got rid of my jet lag, slept well, got up at 5:30 this morning, and I've got an interesting video because it gives us some insight as to how a bank representative views Ripple, the technology, and the on-demand liquidity that is provided by XRP. So I was given some communication. And it's credible. I've seen it. I've seen it in the original format with my own eyes. I have, though, promised not to disclose the names, but I will tell you that it comes from a representative of one of these banks that is backing the Universal Settlement Coin Consortium called Finality. The banks involved are Banco Santander, Bank of New York Mellon, Barclays, CIBC, Commerce Bank, Credit Suisse, ING, KBC Group, Lloyds Banking Group, Mizuho Bank here in Japan, MUFG Group here in Japan, NASDAQ, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corp here in Japan, State Street Bank and Trust, and UBS. Now, the communication went back and forth over a period of days, and it is about Ripple and the suite of products. And Finality, you have to understand, has really two areas of focus. They're building a new payment system. It's called FPS, and it's going to be in each currency, and they're creating FGP, the Finality Global Payments, and it will also create some business applications for those who want to use the new payment functionality. It'll be an independent, decentralized financial market infrastructure called the DFMI, and it will be powered by a wholesale digital settlement coin. So you can call that, sometimes you'll see it abbreviated as W-USC. So this person, which very interestingly enough is also a person that had its hand in making this table. I think you know this table as it was in the guide for central banks presented at Davos this year, and it mentions XRP as an example of crypto assets designed for inter and intra-bank payments and settlements. Now, I'll tell you, it was added, according to this communication, because it's used effectively, but no other reason more than that. They felt they just needed to mention it. So here are the points given, and you must understand that this bank representative thinks that RippleNet is suboptimal. And I will provide to you in the video the 4 points of which I think I'm going to add a little commentary and some facts. And the first point is that it is all about trust. So this person thinks that central banks are more trustworthy than fintechs, who have this third-party risk of market makers that provide the liquidity. All right, we'll look a little further at that. The second point is the liquidity itself. Now, acknowledging that currently the Mexican corridor and the Philippine corridor are very liquid, enough for retail, but not enough for corporates as it is right now. The third point was the intermediary cost, which are the charges that come from the market makers. I will really hit on that with some facts. And also the regulatory clarity, the legal risks. Okay, so first, there's a lot of bias in the opinions given. Now, I would think we would absolutely expect that. He is a representative of one of the backing banks and also a lead in this project. So we shouldn't be surprised for that. There is acknowledgement that there is minimal risk of foreign exchange because, of course, this XRP processes the settlement in 3 seconds, as shown on the Ripple website that allows you to understand how on-demand liquidity works. If you have any sort of blurriness as to how this ODL is executed. I'm going to put a link to this in the description below and you can have a look. It does a very good job of explaining. Also noted and acknowledged is that Ripple technology is streamlining the process through this cheapest pathfinder, rich in transparency, and also there are the benefits for the exotic currency corridors as well. So first, let's take a look at trust, all right? It's getting down to central banks versus fintechs. Well, we all know that in the last financial crisis, the central banks did stick together. Now, will they be able to stay lockstep again? That's not such an easy answer because there is a lot of change. We are in an age of competition, and also the political climate has very much changed since the last financial crisis, and we see a large split among policymakers. There's a battle, and that battle that's going on is to share the serious slowing economy right now. So I see this as one egg in a basket that could easily crack versus a multitude of liquidity partners should Ripple be able to execute on their vision. So a model of many versus a model of one. I think I would choose the model of many. The second point is liquidity, that the business model is dependent on liquidity platforms. True, this is correct. This is correct. But we need to really understand that the current liquidity that sits in correspondent banking accounts really is what XRP eliminates. So to execute a cross-border payment via the correspondent banking network is in the range of $25 to $35. I am reading, by the way, from a report that was made by the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And you can see that the cost is more than 10 times that of an average domestic payment, and that the cost of trapped liquidity in correspondent bank accounts was estimated at 34% of this overall cost. You have the treasury cost, the FX cost, compliance, operations, management. It's very costly to have this capital parked all around the globe to execute these remittances. And XRP takes that component out of the business model. You don't need to have the nostro vostro accounts. A bank would typically have 200 different correspondent banking partners. That's a lot of capital and that's a lot of risk. And in addition, when you're looking at the central bank digital coins, the correspondent banks will need to ensure adequate funding of the wholesale central bank digital coins. These accounts, in order to honor those payment obligations. This implies the monitoring of positions and appropriate balance sheet management is similar to the current practices. Now, here's the most important sentence of all. Trapped liquidity will remain a significant issue for banks with networks of nostro vostro accounts. So this is not a grass is greener on the other side. So I do believe that using a network of market makers and or exchanges is far less costly. The second part of liquidity, let me take you to the XRP chat where the CEO of Flash FX, a on-demand liquidity user in Australia, had a conversation that talks about who takes on that risk. So it is not the banks or payment companies. Those risks sit with the market makers, and they are constantly updating their prices on the exchange. And they can't see who and why the order is being hit. And they are updating those live quotes all the time. And should there be price movement of a fraction within that time frame of when you commit and when it settles between exchange A and B. For that purpose, they have an XRP pool to buffer against any positive or negative price changes. The pool is supplied by Ripple. So I think this is some of the inner workings of ODL that this person just didn't know about. So let's look at liquidity also from another angle. I'm taking you to the Ripple Jobs Board. Currently, there's a senior product manager for Liquidity open. This position is all about leveraging on-demand liquidity with XRP. Interestingly, it states that there's a new feature to drive adoption of cross-border payments with XRP. I'm curious what that is. So the person who gets this position is going to be developing a phased approach for improving XRP liquidity at key asset exchanges to support the growth, optimizing velocity and value combinations for XRP movements. That's the focus. Now, it's important that Ripple get this done. And should they be able to secure a solid array of market makers and exchanges, this business model is going to work. Third, addressing the question of fees, that intermediary cost. Well, the market makers work on a very thin spread, very thin. You can see that the typical spread between US dollars and the Japanese yen is 0.5 or up to 2.5 pips. Pips is the way they measure. It's called percentage in point. In less liquid currency corridors, you might see a 4.5 pips. And I think you can easily understand these pips by looking at this right here. It is usually the last decimal place of the price quote. Okay, so you can see how narrow those spreads are. And the last point of criticism was being dependent on a cryptocurrency whose legal status is still unclear, citing legal risk. Well, again, fair enough. I know we are just waiting for regulatory clarity. And here is an article that came out on March 9th, and U.S. Congressman has introduced a new Cryptocurrency Act of 2020. This comes from Representative Paul Gosar. He's a Republican from Arizona. And he introduced this bill to provide not only clarity, but legitimacy. Now, I know how these bills go. Sometimes they take years. Sometimes they don't get renewed when there is a new session. I'm not really hanging my hat on this particular bill, but I'm really happy to see that there are people in Washington, D.C. working towards that. About 11 hours ago, another story broke, and this is about Hester Pierce. She is, of course, someone who is very much an advocate for crypto. She is working at the SEC, and she says that the SEC is a partner to crypto as it chases its U.S. regulations. So I am really hoping that she can continue to make some forward strides in this area. I really do think she's giving it her best shot. So in conclusion, the fees of the intermediary, you're still better off with XRP and getting rid of those Nostra accounts and the correspondent banking models. Trust? Well, what do you think? Do you trust central banks, or do you trust a strong network of multiple liquidity providers? I think if Ripple can build that, I, again, would rather put my trust in a lot of eggs than just one that can easily crack. Liquidity? I think that you saw that should the liquidity partners and exchanges be built, this business model is solid. In regards to the regulatory clarity, well, I know it just can't happen fast enough. Okay, everybody, I hope that was interesting. For me, it was very interesting to see the comments coming from someone who's building another product. Okay, let's jump to some fluff. I'm sticking with the bridge because we were talking about XRP, the bridge currency, but I'm going to talk about bridges in Japan. This is actually a beautiful woodblock print by a prolific artist from the Edo period called Hokusai, and he did a series of the views of Mount Fuji. You can see Mount Fuji underneath here. These are called in Japanese ukiyo-e, and the ukiyo-e are woodblock prints that require each color to be laid down one color at a time. So you can imagine how difficult it would be through these very precise measurements of registry. It's not an easy process at all. This print, I believe, is actually in the Dutch National Museum right now. It was brought back from Japan by a doctor in the late 1700s. Looking at the bridge design in Japan, it originally came from China. It has since been slightly changed in terms of its style and has more of a Japanese flavor in many ways. But this art shape, or moon bridge as it is often called, was designed so that the boats could freely move underneath, because in those days, water, or the rivers, were really the rails to move and transport goods and services. So this is why you see this shape. And then the aesthetics with the reflection in the water to create this moon shape is just really, really beautiful. Now, one of the most photographed bridges to this day is the Kintaikyo Bridge in Yamaguchi Prefecture. This is another ukiyo-e print, and the bridge is shown here, which was originally built in 1673. Its unique design was made so that it was difficult for invading armies to cross the Nishigawa River. Now, Yamaguchi City is a castle town, so if you love castles, this is really one of the rare treasures of Japan. It was constructed in 1601. And now today, the bridge that they have is one of the most photographed bridges in all of Japan. It's just really very beautiful. They have lost the top portion, I think, twice from typhoons, but the bottom pillars are basically the same, that have stayed intact. And this photograph is really pretty. It's a nighttime view lit up during the sakura cherry blossom season. Very beautiful. And you can even see from this angle the reflection in the water. Now, the point of this fluff actually is to tell you about the manhole covers. I have covered this on occasion a couple of other times, but every city and town has unique manhole covers. This is the one from Yamaguchi. You can see the bridge, you can see the castle, and this is actually a fisherman that is fishing at night. They do so with a big bucket of flame to light up the water, and they work in partnership with these birds to fish. It's very, very unique way of cormorant fishing. Anyway, that's probably for another fluff. But I want to point out how beautiful these manhole covers are, and you can see that they range from Pokemon to Mount Fuji, castles, architectural landscapes, bridges, sake brewers, gosh, just on and on. And when you do come to Japan, bring some paper with you. And with that paper, you can use a piece of charcoal or a Conti crayon and lay the paper on top of the manhole and give it a rubbing. You'll get one of the most beautiful rubbings of these designs you've ever seen. I do it often, and I have many, and it's fun. All right, everybody, do take care. Sayonara for now. Bye-bye.